Welcome, rational thinkers and champions of evidence-based reasoning, to the Free of Faith podcast. This is the place where we dare to peel back the comforting but opaque layers of faith-based claims and expose their logical shortcomings. Today, we're critiquing the notion that the three-day death of Jesus covers the eternal punishment of billions of sinners. We're diving deep into questions of justice, proportionality, and the mathematical coherence of one of Christianity's central claims. Let's set the scene with an analogy. Imagine a judge who decrees that every jaywalker must spend the rest of their life in a miserable prison. Absurd already, right? Now imagine he locks up 1 million jaywalkers, but then declares that his beloved son will serve their sentence instead. The problem? His son stays locked up for only 3 days. The judge then triumphantly proclaims,
"The penalty has been paid in full."
Would any adult human call that justice? The logical flaws are glaring. 3 days cannot equal an eternity, no matter how many theological bows are tied around the idea. Of course, many Christians argue that Jesus, being innocent, had a unique qualification to take on this punishment. But let's press pause here. Would imprisoning an innocent person for 3 days truly balance the scales against the eternal damnation of billions? Even if we entertain the controversial idea of substitutionary punishment, proportionality remains a massive obstacle. Substitutionary justice assumes that the punishment borne by the substitute is at least equivalent to the punishment owed. But the claim we're asked to swallow here is that one short 3-day death equals billions upon billions of eternities. This isn't just illogical, it's a profound misunderstanding of scale. Now, let's turn the analogy up a notch. Suppose a restaurant has 1,000 diners who each owe $1,000. Instead of paying, the owner's child drops $3 into the till, and the owner forgives all debts. Seem fair? Of course not. A token gesture does not balance astronomical accounts. Imagine a marathon event. Marathons are 42 kilometers. Suppose one of the officials has his child run just 3 kilometers for an injured runner and then insists the entire distance has been covered. Seem fair to you? Again, the absurdity is obvious. The problem compounds when we look at the theological claims about death itself. Some argue it's not the length of Jesus' suffering that matters, but simply the fact of death. But if death itself cancels sin, why are humans not resurrected immediately upon dying? If the penalty is satisfied at death, eternal punishment is unnecessary and unjust. That contradiction alone undermines the logic of the doctrine. So how do theologians respond? Some try to argue that Jesus' death has infinite value because he is divine. Therefore, his finite suffering carries infinite weight. But this notion immediately fails when we consider whether a judge's son can legitimately walk away from serving a 30-year prison term after serving 3 hours based on the judge's immense love for his son. The value of the son is no factor in the calculus determining whether the sentence has been served. Another response is to say that God gets to decide what counts as justice. But wrenching the conventional notion of justice away from the term to salvage incoherent theology is self-defeating. If justice equates to nothing more than divine fiat, then it isn't justice at all. Others claim that sin against an infinite God requires an infinite atonement, and Jesus, being divine, somehow fits the bill. But what infinite aspect of Jesus could accomplish this? The term infinite is invoked like a magic wand, in the hope no one will ask which infinite qualities of Jesus could ever achieve the serving of an eternal term of punishment in just 3 days. Still others say the resurrection demonstrates the victory over sin and proves the sufficiency of those 3 days. Yet this does not solve the proportionality issue. It only adds spectacle. Then there's the appeal to mystery. Theologians frequently tell us that human minds simply cannot grasp the logic of atonement. But appealing to mystery isn't a solution. It's a refusal to engage. It shuts down inquiry rather than answering it. Let's circle back to the core issue. If the penalty for sin is eternal, then no finite suffering can satisfy it. Jesus suffered for 3 days. His suffering did not extend into eternity. If you assume, instead, that his 3 days did count as eternity, then the logic collapses in the other direction. 3 days of suffering for any sinner should also pay the penalty for their sin. Either way, the doctrine collapses under its own contradictions. If God truly wanted to forgive humanity, why would such mathematical gymnastics be necessary at all? Why require the death of his Son? Why not simply forgive at the point of punishment a normal, compassionate human deems appropriate? The entire biblical framework reeks of incoherent invention and is superficially sustained by the duct tape of ad hoc assertions. Some listeners might ask,
but what about love? Isn't this all about God's love?
if love is the goal, there is no need to wrap it in the trappings of injustice and incoherence. Releasing billions of guilty people after 3 days of someone else's suffering doesn't reflect love. It trivializes both justice and compassion. Claiming that Jesus' 3-day death atones for the eternal damnation of billions requires you to believe that finite equals infinite, that substitution can bypass proportionality, and that justice can be redefined into whatever God declares it to be. It requires you to suspend your rational faculties and accept contradictions as sacred truths. 3 days cannot equal eternity. The central claim of Christian atonement does not stand up to scrutiny. It fails mathematically, logically, and conceptually, and is undeserving of our respect or allegiance. If this conversation has sparked some questions or even some discomfort, that's a good thing. Questioning is the first step toward clarity. Don't settle for easy answers or platitudes. Dive deeper, explore further, and demand evidence. Head over to Free of Faith to read the full article and join the discussion. Let's keep this conversation going, because the pursuit of truth doesn't stop at questioning. It's about finding answers that actually make sense. Thank you for tuning in to the Free of Faith podcast, where we expose the logical failings of faith and celebrate the clarity that comes with reason. Until next time, stay skeptical, stay curious, and remember, rationality always outperforms faith. Engage reality, and I'll see you soon.